I drove 8 hours to surprise my husband Colby at his Denver conference, only to find my sister Nell's red BMW parked outside his hotel. He was supposed to be networking with pharmaceutical executives, not making out with my own sister in the lobby bar. When I confronted them, Colby laughed and said I was being paranoid. So I hired a private investigator, exposed their year-long affair to both our families during Thanksgiving dinner.
Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're a subscriber, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Tell us a duh.
And handed Nell's husband divorce papers along with a USB drive of evidence. The scandal destroyed Colby's career and left Nell homeless when her husband kicked her out. But let me take you back to where this nightmare began 3 months earlier, when I still believed my husband's lies and trusted my sister completely. Every Tuesday morning at Mercy General Hospital followed the same comforting rhythm. I'd arrive at 6:30 a.m. sharp, coffee in hand, ready to tackle another 12-hour shift as head nurse in the cardiac unit. The early morning quiet of the hospital corridors, broken only by the soft beeping of monitors and hushed conversations between night shift staff, had become my sanctuary over the past 8 years. My name is Sophie Cross, and at 34, I'd built what I thought was a stable, predictable life. Colby Stone, my husband of 6 years, worked as a regional sales manager for Pritchett Pharmaceuticals, a job that required frequent travel but paid well enough for us to afford our 2-story colonial in the suburbs of Richmond. Our daughter Elaine, just turned 7, attended Riverside Elementary, where she excelled in art class and struggled endlessly with mathematics, much like I had at her age. That particular Tuesday started like any other. I was adjusting Mrs. Hatchett's IV drip when my phone buzzed with Colby's familiar morning text. "Flight delayed again. Denver conference might run an extra day. Miss you both." I smiled, typing back quickly between patient rounds. "Safe travels. Elaine has her school play Thursday. Try to make it back." Colby's travel schedule had intensified over the past year. Phoenix last month, Atlanta the month before, now Denver for what he described as a critical pharmaceutical summit. His dedication to work had always been something I admired, even when it meant single parenting through Elaine's homework meltdowns and weekend soccer games. The extra income from his regional promotion had allowed us to finally start the college fund we'd been talking about since Elaine was born. During my lunch break, I called my sister Nell to confirm our Thursday dinner plans. At 31, she was 3 years younger but infinitely more glamorous, working as a marketing coordinator for a luxury real estate firm downtown. Her husband, Rick Robbins, owned a successful accounting practice, and they lived in one of those pristine neighborhoods where every lawn looked professionally maintained. "Sophie, I'm so sorry." Nell's voice carried that apologetic tone I'd grown accustomed to. "Rick's got this client emergency. We'll have to push dinner to next week." I tried to hide my disappointment as I stirred my cafeteria yogurt. Nell had canceled our last 3 planned get-togethers, always with perfectly reasonable excuses that left me feeling guilty for being disappointed. "Everything okay with you two?" I asked, noting the strain in her voice I'd been hearing more frequently lately. "Just work stress," she replied quickly. "You know how demanding Rick's practice can be during tax season." After hanging up, I felt that familiar pang of loneliness that seemed to hit whenever both Colby and Nell were unavailable. As the middle child between my older brother James, who lived across the country in Seattle, and Nell, I'd always been the peacekeeper, the reliable one everyone turned to in crisis, but somehow overlooked when making social plans. My colleague Virginia Black, a fellow nurse who'd become my closest friend at work, noticed my subdued mood during our afternoon break. At 42, Virginia possessed the kind of blunt wisdom that came from raising 3 teenagers as a single mother while working full-time in healthcare. "Nell canceled again?" she asked, settling into the chair across from me in the break room. Virginia had developed an uncanny ability to read my expressions after years of working together through medical emergencies and personal dramas. I nodded, feeling childish for being bothered by something so trivial. It's silly, I know. She's busy with her own life. "Honey, when's the last time you did something just for you?" Virginia's question caught me off guard. I mean, besides work and taking care of Elaine and keeping house for Colby. The question hung in the air, more challenging than I'd expected. When had I last prioritized my own needs? My days revolved around patient care schedules, Elaine's activities, and maintaining the household routines that kept our family functioning smoothly. Even my hobbies, the mystery novels I read before bed, the small garden I tended on weekends, felt like stolen moments squeezed between more important responsibilities. That evening, I helped Elaine practice her lines for the school play while preparing dinner. She was playing a sunflower in the third-grade production of The Garden Adventure, a role she'd been rehearsing with dramatic flair for weeks. "Mommy, do you think Daddy will really come to my play?" she asked, looking up from her costume fitting. The bright yellow petals of her headpiece framed her serious face, making her look both adorable and worried. "He's going to try his best, sweetheart," I replied, the same answer I'd given for countless school events over the years. Daddy's trip is very important for his work. Elaine nodded solemnly, accepting this explanation the way children learn to accept their parents' limitations. But I caught the flash of disappointment that crossed her features before she resumed practicing her choreographed movements. After tucking Elaine into bed, I settled into my evening routine of reviewing medical journals and responding to work emails. The house felt particularly quiet with Colby away, filled only with the soft hum of the refrigerator and distant traffic sounds from the main road. Around 9 p.m., I tried calling Colby to check in, but his phone went straight to voicemail. Conference dinners often ran late, and hotel Wi-Fi could be unreliable. Still, I found myself slightly disappointed not to hear his voice before bed. I was just closing my laptop when a text finally came through. "Sorry, crazy day. Conference dinner ran late. Love you both." The message felt hurried, almost perfunctory, lacking the warmth of his usual evening check-ins. As I prepared for bed, I found myself thinking about Virginia's question. When had I become so focused on everyone else's needs that I'd forgotten to consider my own? The realization bothered me more than Nell's canceled dinner or Colby's brief text message. Standing at my bedroom window, looking out at the quiet suburban street where we'd built our life together, I made a mental note to plan something special for myself after Colby returned. Maybe a weekend spa day or a visit to the art museum I'd been wanting to explore. Small acts of self-care that felt both necessary and long overdue. I had no way of knowing that within 72 hours, my carefully constructed world would shatter completely, revealing that the two people I trusted most had been betraying me for months. The life I thought I knew, built on assumptions of loyalty and honesty, was about to prove as fragile as the hospital patients I cared for daily. Sleep came easily that night, my last peaceful rest before everything changed forever. Wednesday morning brought unexpected good news that lifted my spirits considerably. Dr. Lori Pritchett, the chief of cardiology, and coincidentally a distant relative of Colby's employer, stopped by the nurses' station during rounds with an announcement that made my entire week. "Sophie, I've been reviewing your performance evaluations," he said, his kind eyes crinkling behind wire-rimmed glasses. "The hospital board has approved your application for the Cardiac Specialist Certification Program, full tuition reimbursement, paid study time, and a significant salary increase upon completion." I nearly dropped the patient chart I was holding. I'd applied for the program 6 months ago, knowing the competition was fierce and the waiting list extensive. This certification would advance my career beyond anything I'd imagined possible, opening doors to supervisory positions and specialized cardiac units at prestigious hospitals. "Dr. Pritchett, I don't know what to say," I stammered, feeling tears of joy threatening to spill over. "This is incredible news." "You've earned it, Sophie. Your dedication to patient care and your leadership during the cardiac emergency protocols last month didn't go unnoticed. The program starts in 6 weeks, but we'll need to discuss scheduling adjustments soon." After he walked away, I immediately called Colby to share the news, practically vibrating with excitement. His phone rang 4 times before going to voicemail. "Colby, call me back as soon as you get this. I have amazing news that I can't wait to share. Love you." I tried Nell next, knowing she'd understand the significance of this career milestone. Her phone also went to voicemail, which was unusual, since she typically answered calls during work hours unless she was with clients. Virginia found me grinning like an idiot while updating patient files. Someone looks like they just won the lottery, she observed, settling down with her own stack of charts. Better than the lottery, I explained about the certification program, watching her face light up with genuine happiness for my success.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
Sophie, this is huge. You've been working towards something like this for years. When does the program start? 6 weeks. I'll need to adjust my schedule for classes, but the hospital is being incredibly supportive. Can you believe they're covering full tuition? Virginia raised an eyebrow thoughtfully. How's Colby going to handle the schedule changes? More responsibility for him with Elaine's activities and household stuff. The question gave me a moment's pause. Colby had always been supportive of my career in theory, but the practical implications of my advancement would require significant adjustments to our family routine. More study time for me meant more solo parenting duties for him, especially during his already busy travel schedule. He'll be thrilled, I said, pushing aside any doubts. He's always encouraged me to pursue advancement opportunities. That evening, I picked up Elaine from her after-school art program, where she proudly showed me a watercolor painting of our families standing in front of our house. The figures were charmingly disproportionate, with Colby depicted as a giant stick figure towering over Elaine and me. "Daddy's really tall in this picture," I observed, admiring her artistic interpretation. "He's the biggest because he's the most important," Elaine explained matter-of-factly. "Mrs. Cross says daddies have the most important jobs because they make the money for families." I paused, considering how to respond to this unexpected commentary on family dynamics. "Well, sweetie, mommies and daddies both have important jobs. My job helping sick people get better is important too." Elaine nodded seriously, then brightened. "Maybe Daddy will be home for my play tomorrow. I practiced my sunflower dance extra hard today." "I hope so, honey. He's working very hard at his conference, but he knows how important your play is." At home, I prepared Elaine's favorite dinner, grilled cheese sandwiches cut into star shapes with tomato soup, while she worked on homework at the kitchen table. The house felt more manageable with just the two of us, less cluttered somehow. I found myself actually enjoying the unhurried pace of our evening routine, without the pressure of accommodating Colby's preferences for dinner timing and television choices. Around 7 p.m., Colby finally returned my call, sounding distracted and tired. Background noise suggested he was in a restaurant or bar, with multiple conversations and clinking glasses creating a buzzy atmosphere. "Sophie, sorry I missed your call earlier. This conference has been absolutely insane. What's the news?" I launched into an excited explanation of the certification program, describing the career implications and timeline. His response felt oddly muted, lacking the enthusiasm I'd expected. "That's great, honey, really great," he said, but something in his tone suggested his attention was elsewhere. "Listen, I'm at a networking dinner right now. Can we talk more about this when I get home? This might actually run until Friday now. Apparently there's an additional session they want our team to attend." My excitement deflated slightly. "Friday? But Elaine's play is Thursday evening. You promised you'd try to make it." I know, but this is a major opportunity for advancement. The regional directors are all here, and there's talk of expanding my territory. Think about what that could mean for our financial future, especially with your program tuition." I reminded him that my tuition was fully covered, but he'd already moved on, explaining something about pharmaceutical market expansions and territory redistributions. The conversation felt rushed, almost businesslike, lacking the warmth and mutual celebration I'd anticipated. "Daddy says he might miss my play," I explained during her bedtime routine, watching her face fall with practiced disappointment. "It's okay, Mommy. You'll be there, right?" "Absolutely. Front row, taking pictures and cheering louder than anyone else." After Elaine fell asleep, I tried calling Nell again, hoping to share my good news with someone who would truly understand its significance. Her phone went straight to voicemail, which was becoming a frustrating pattern. I left a brief message about the certification program, asking her to call back when she had a chance. Settling into the living room with a cup of tea and one of my mystery novels, I found myself thinking about the changes ahead. The certification program would be demanding, requiring evening classes twice a week and weekend study sessions. I'd need Colby's support more than ever, especially with his travel schedule. Yet something about his reaction to my news had felt off. Not unsupportive exactly, but distracted, as if his mind was elsewhere during our conversation. I attributed it to conference stress and the pressure of networking with corporate executives. I was just closing my book when my phone buzzed with a text from Nell. "Sorry, crazy busy day. Congratulations on the program. We should celebrate this weekend. Drinks at that new wine bar downtown?" Her message lifted my spirits considerably. A celebration with my sister was exactly what I needed, especially if Colby remained tied up with work obligations through Friday. "Perfect," I texted back. "Saturday evening? I can arrange childcare for Elaine." "Absolutely. Can't wait to hear all the details. So proud of you, sis." As I prepared for bed, I felt a renewed sense of optimism about the future. The certification program represented years of hard work finally paying off, opening doors I'd only dreamed about. Sure, Colby's reaction had been subdued, but he was under pressure with his own career advancement opportunities. I fell asleep planning how to balance my new academic responsibilities with family obligations, completely unaware that my sister and husband were together in Denver, sharing intimate dinners while I celebrated my achievements alone. The weekend celebration I was looking forward to would never happen, and the supportive family dynamic I was counting on was already a lie. The trust I placed in both of them, the foundation of everything I believed about my life, was about to crumble in the most devastating way possible. Thursday morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn energy that usually made me feel optimistic about the day ahead. Elaine bounced around the kitchen in her school uniform, practicing her sunflower choreography between bites of cereal. Her excitement about the evening play infectious, despite my lingering disappointment about Colby's absence. "Mrs. Patterson says my costume is the most realistic sunflower she's ever seen," Elaine announced, spinning in a circle that sent her blonde hair flying. "And guess what? I get to say the opening line of the whole play." "That's wonderful, sweetheart. What's your line?" She straightened up with dramatic flair, placing one hand over her heart. "In this garden of dreams, every flower has a story to tell, and mine begins with sunshine and hope." I applauded enthusiastically, pushing aside my frustration with Colby for missing this milestone. Elaine had been working toward this moment for weeks, memorizing not only her lines, but also the complex movements that accompanied each scene. At the hospital, my excitement about the certification program was dampened by a growing sense of unease I couldn't quite identify. Dr. Pritchett stopped by during morning rounds to discuss the program logistics, explaining that classes would begin the first Monday of next month. "You'll need to adjust your shift schedule to accommodate Tuesday and Thursday evening seminars," he explained, reviewing the course catalog with me. "The hospital is prepared to modify your hours accordingly, but we'll need confirmation from your family that they can support the scheduling changes." "Absolutely. My husband is very supportive of my career advancement," I assured him, though Colby's lukewarm response the night before still bothered me. "Excellent. The program coordinator will contact you next week to finalize enrollment details and discuss the clinical rotation requirements." As Dr. Pritchett walked away, I realized I hadn't actually confirmed the schedule changes with Colby. His travel obligations were intensifying, and adding my evening classes to the mix would require careful coordination of childcare arrangements. I tried calling him during my lunch break, but his phone went straight to voicemail again. This was becoming a frustrating pattern. Yesterday's missed calls, brief conversations, and now complete unavailability. Conference schedules could be demanding, but his communication had never been this sporadic during previous business trips. "Still no word from the traveling husband?" Virginia asked, joining me in the break room where I sat staring at my phone. "He's been really hard to reach this trip. Must be an intensive conference schedule." Virginia's expression shifted slightly, that subtle change I'd learned to recognize when she was choosing her words carefully. "Sophie, can I ask you something? And promise me you won't get defensive." My stomach tightened. Virginia's direct approach usually preceded conversations I wasn't prepared to have. Of course. When's the last time Colby actually answered his phone during a business trip? I mean, really answered, not just sent quick texts or returned calls hours later. The question caught me off guard because I couldn't immediately remember. His travel communication had become increasingly minimal over the past several months, a pattern I'd attributed to his growing responsibilities and longer conference schedules. "He's been really busy with this regional expansion project," I said, hearing the defensive note in my own voice, despite promising not to react that way. "I'm sure he has been. I just think you deserve better communication, especially when you're handling everything at home alone." Before I could respond, my phone buzzed with a text from Nell. "Rain check on Saturday? Something came up with Rick's family. So sorry." I stared at the message, feeling a familiar disappointment that seemed disproportionate to the situation. This was the fourth time in 2 months that Nell had canceled our plans, always with reasonable explanations that left me feeling guilty for being bothered. "Another cancellation?" Virginia asked, reading my expression. "My sister. We were supposed to celebrate my certification news this weekend." "That's the third time this month, isn't it?" I nodded, realizing Virginia had been paying attention to my repeated disappointments. She's been really busy with work lately, and Rick's family stuff. Maybe, or maybe she's avoiding something. Virginia's observation lingered in my mind as I returned to work, adding another layer to my growing sense that something was shifting in my relationships. First Colby's distant communication, now Nell's pattern of cancellations. Perhaps I was being overly sensitive, reading problems into normal scheduling conflicts. The afternoon passed slowly as I found myself checking my phone repeatedly for messages from Colby. Elaine's play was starting at 6 p.m., and despite his absence, I wanted to share the moment with him somehow, maybe through photos or a quick video call. At 4 p.m., just as I was preparing to leave for Elaine's school, Colby finally called. I answered eagerly, hoping he'd found time between conference sessions to talk. "Sophie, I'm so sorry about the timing, but this conference has been extended again. They've scheduled additional meetings through Sunday now." "Sunday? Colby, that's almost a full week. This was supposed to be a 3-day trip." I know, but the opportunities here are incredible. They're discussing a promotion that could double my territory and significantly increase my commission structure. This could change everything for our family's financial future." His enthusiasm about the career prospects felt hollow somehow, lacking the genuine excitement I'd expected. The conversation moved quickly, with background noise suggesting he was walking through a busy area, possibly a hotel lobby or restaurant. "I recorded Elaine practicing her lines this morning," I offered. "Want me to send the video?" "Definitely. Send it along, and take lots of pictures tonight. I feel terrible about missing this." Yet he didn't sound particularly regretful, more distracted than disappointed. The call ended abruptly when he explained he needed to join colleagues for dinner planning sessions. As I drove to Elaine's school, Virginia's questions echoed in my mind. When had Colby's communication become so minimal and perfunctory? When had Nell started avoiding our sister time? The answers felt uncomfortable, suggesting patterns I'd been unconsciously accommodating for months. Riverside Elementary's auditorium buzzed with excited families gathering for the evening performance. I found a seat in the 3rd row, positioning myself for optimal photo opportunities while scanning the crowd for other familiar faces. Several of Elaine's classmates had grandparents, aunts, and uncles in attendance, creating a warm atmosphere of extended family support. My phone showed no new messages from Colby or Nell as the lights dimmed and the curtain rose. I focused my attention on the stage, determined to be fully present for Elaine's moment, despite feeling oddly isolated among the enthusiastic audience. When Elaine appeared in her bright yellow costume, delivering her opening line with perfect clarity and confidence, my heart swelled with pride. She moved through her choreography flawlessly, her face beaming with joy as she embodied her sunflower character. I recorded everything, taking dozens of photos and several videos to share with Colby later. Yet, even in this moment of celebration, I couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental was shifting in my carefully constructed world, like the first hairline cracks appearing in a foundation I'd always assumed was solid. The applause for Elaine's performance was thunderous, and she took her bow with the grace of a seasoned performer. As I prepared to collect her backstage, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You don't know me, but I think we should talk. It's about your husband and sister." My blood turned cold as I stared at the message, reading it 3 times before the words fully registered. The auditorium suddenly felt suffocating, the cheerful chaos of families celebrating their children's achievements fading into white noise as my world began to crack apart. I sat frozen in my seat, staring at the anonymous message, while families around me filed out of the auditorium. The words seemed to burn into my retinas. "You don't know me, but I think we should talk. It's about your husband and sister." My hands trembled as I screenshot the message, then immediately deleted it, then took another screenshot. The rational part of my mind insisted this was probably spam, a cruel prank, or someone with the wrong number. But a deeper instinct, one I'd been suppressing for weeks, recognized the awful ring of truth. "Mommy!" Elaine's voice snapped me back to reality. She was running down the aisle in her sunflower costume, her face glowing with post-performance excitement. "Did you see me? Did you get pictures?" "You were absolutely perfect, sweetheart," I managed, forcing enthusiasm into my voice while sliding my phone into my purse. "The best sunflower I've ever seen." As we walked to the car, Elaine chattered excitedly about the performance, recounting every moment in vivid detail. I nodded and responded appropriately, but my mind was spinning with questions about the mysterious text. Who would contact me about Colby and Nell? What did they know that I apparently didn't? At home, I helped Elaine out of her costume and into pajamas, going through our bedtime routine on autopilot. She wanted to call Daddy to tell him about the play, but when I tried his number, it went straight to voicemail again. "He must be in important meetings," I explained, tucking her into bed, "but I took lots of pictures and videos to show him when he gets home." After Elaine fell asleep, I sat in my kitchen staring at my phone, debating whether to respond to the anonymous message. Every logical instinct told me to delete it and forget about it. Mysterious texts from strangers rarely led anywhere good, but the gnawing anxiety in my stomach wouldn't let me dismiss it entirely. Finally, I typed back, "Who is this? What are you talking about?" The response came within minutes. "My name is Lizzie Hatchett. I work at the Grandview Hotel in Denver. I think your husband is here with someone who isn't you." My heart started pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The Grandview Hotel was where Colby always stayed during his Denver conferences. His company had a corporate rate there, and he'd mentioned the hotel's name in previous trip updates. "I don't understand," I texted back, my fingers feeling clumsy on the keyboard. "I'm the night desk manager. Your husband checked in Monday with a woman who signed the register as Mrs. Stone. But tonight, I overheard her talking on the phone about her sister Sophie. She mentioned you by name, talking about how you had no idea about their relationship. I looked up your husband's registration from previous days and found your contact information listed as his emergency contact." The room started spinning. I gripped the edge of the kitchen counter, trying to process what I was reading. Nell was in Denver. With Colby? She had signed in as Mrs. Stone, using his last name like they were married. "Are you sure it's them?" I typed, even though some part of me already knew the answer. "I can send you a photo from the security camera if you want. They're sitting in our lobby bar right now." I stared at the message for a long time before responding. Send it. 2 minutes later, my phone buzzed with an image that shattered my world completely. There, captured in grainy hotel security footage, were Colby and Nell sitting intimately close at a small round table. His arm was draped around his shoulders, and she was leaning into him with the comfortable familiarity of an established couple. They were both laughing at something, looking relaxed and happy in a way that made my stomach turn. Nell was wearing the red dress I'd complimented her on last month when she said she was buying it for a client appreciation dinner. Colby had on the blue blazer I'd helped him pick out for this conference, the one he claimed would help him make a good impression on the pharmaceutical executives. I took screenshot after screenshot, my hands shaking so violently I nearly dropped the phone. Then I ran to the bathroom and threw up, my body rejecting the reality of what I'd just seen. When I could finally think clearly again, I texted Lizzie back, "How long have they been coming there together?" I started working nights 6 months ago. I've seen them together at least 8 times since then, always registered as Mr. and Mrs. Stone. They seem very comfortable here, like regulars. I'm so sorry to be the one telling you this.
8 times. 6 months. While I'd been celebrating Colby's career advancement and increased travel opportunities, he'd been conducting an affair with my sister. All those canceled dinners with Nell, all those extended conferences, all those times they were both mysteriously unavailable when I called. I scrolled through my text messages with Nell, looking for patterns I'd missed. Her cancellation tonight suddenly made perfect sense. She was in Denver with my husband, probably planning this trip weeks ago while pretending to care about celebrating my certification program. My phone rang, startling me out of my detective work. It was Virginia calling, probably checking on how Elaine's play went. "Sophie, how was the performance? I bet Elaine was amazing." "She was perfect," I said, surprised by how normal my voice sounded. "Virginia, can I ask you something? If you suspected someone you loved was betraying you, would you want to know for certain?" There was a pause. "Honey, what's going on? Did something happen?" I found myself telling her everything. The anonymous text, the hotel worker, the security camera photo. Virginia listened without interrupting, occasionally making small sounds of sympathy or outrage. "Sophie, I'm so sorry, but you need to see this through. You can't unknow what you already know, and you deserve the complete truth. What would you do if you were me? I'd get in my car and drive to Denver tonight. I'd walk into that hotel and see with my own eyes exactly what my husband and sister thought they were getting away with." The suggestion was both terrifying and appealing. 8 hours in the car would give me time to process what I'd learned, to prepare for whatever confrontation awaited me. But it would also mean leaving Elaine alone overnight, something I'd never done before. "I can't leave Elaine," I said. "Bring her to my house. Tell her it's a sleepover playdate with my girls. She'll think it's an adventure, and you'll know she's safe while you handle this situation." As I sat in my kitchen, surrounded by the normal debris of our evening routine, Elaine's backpack on the counter, her sunflower costume draped over a chair, the dinner dishes I hadn't yet washed, I realized that this was probably the last night I'd spend in ignorance. Tomorrow, everything would be different. I made the decision that would change everything. I was going to Denver. I was going to see my husband and sister together with my own eyes. And then I was going to decide exactly how to destroy the lives of the 2 people who had betrayed me most deeply. The drive to Denver would give me 8 hours to plan my revenge, and I intended to make every minute count. Friday morning arrived with deceptive normalcy. I woke Elaine at her usual time, helped her get dressed for school, and prepared breakfast while my mind raced with the logistics of my impromptu Denver trip. She chattered excitedly about her successful performance the night before, completely unaware that her world was about to change forever. "Can we call Daddy now?" she asked between bites of cereal. "I want to tell him about how loud everyone clapped." "We'll tie him later, sweetheart. Remember, he's in important meetings all day." The lie tasted bitter in my mouth, but I couldn't bear to shatter her innocent faith in her father just yet. That conversation would come soon enough after I had concrete proof of what I already knew in my heart. I called in sick to work, something I'd done perhaps 3 times in 8 years. The guilt of lying to my colleagues felt insignificant compared to the magnitude of deception I was about to uncover. Dr. Pritchett's administrative assistant took my message with professional concern, reminding me to take care of myself and return when I felt better. If only she knew that feeling better would require dismantling my entire life first. After dropping Elaine at school, I drove straight to Virginia's house to finalize our childcare arrangement. She answered the door still in her scrubs from the night shift, her expression immediately shifting to concern when she saw my face. "You look like you didn't sleep at all," she observed, ushering me into her kitchen where coffee was already brewing. "I didn't. I spent the night going through every text message, every canceled plan, every business trip. Virginia, the patterns are everywhere once you know what to look for." I showed her the screenshots I'd organized chronologically, Colby's travel dates perfectly aligning with Nell's canceled sister dinners, their simultaneous unavailability during my certification celebration call, even subtle changes in their text message timing over the past 6 months. "This is extensive planning," Virginia said, studying the evidence. "This isn't some impulsive affair. They've been deliberately coordinating to deceive you."
I keep thinking about last Christmas, I admitted, accepting the coffee mug she offered. Nell gave Colby that expensive cologne, said she'd noticed he was wearing the same scent and thought he might like a better brand. I thought it was thoughtful sister-in-law behavior. And now I realize she knew his scent because she'd been close enough to notice what cologne he wore to work versus what he wore to bed. Virginia's expression hardened. "Sophie, you need to be prepared for this to be worse than you think. If they've been this careful about hiding it, there might be other things you haven't discovered yet." I'd already considered this possibility during my sleepless night. Financial irregularities, shared credit cards, maybe even discussions about leaving their respective spouses. The rabbit hole of betrayal might extend far deeper than simple adultery. "I need to see it with my own eyes," I said. "I need to watch them together, hear them talk about me, understand exactly how much of my life has been a lie. And then what? What's your plan once you have absolute proof?" The question I'd been avoiding all night. Revenge felt necessary, but the scope and method remained unclear. Public humiliation seemed fitting for people who'd been secretly mocking my ignorance. Financial consequences seemed appropriate for deception that had probably cost me money through Colby's fabricated travel expenses. But the precise strategy would depend on what I discovered in Denver. "I'm going to destroy them both," I said quietly, methodically, completely, and publicly. They're going to lose everything that matters to them, the same way they've destroyed everything that mattered to me. Virginia studied my face carefully. "I know you're angry, and you have every right to be, but promise me you'll be smart about this. Don't do anything that could hurt you legally or professionally. I promise. This isn't going to be some emotional outburst. It's going to be calculated and devastating." I spent the rest of the morning preparing for the Denver trip. I packed an overnight bag, arranged for Virginia to pick up Elaine from school and keep her through Saturday, and researched the Grandview Hotel's layout and amenities. The hotel's website showed an elegant lobby bar where Lizzie had photographed them together, multiple restaurants, and even a small business center. At 1 p.m., I began the 8-hour drive to Denver, my mind alternating between fury and heartbreak as interstate miles passed beneath my wheels. The autumn landscape blurred past while I rehearsed potential confrontation scenarios, each more satisfying than the last. I called Lizzie around 4 p.m. to confirm my arrival plans. "I'll be there around 9 p.m., I told her. "Are they still checked in?" "Yes, still registered through Sunday morning. They had dinner in the main dining room last night, very cozy looking. I'm working the night desk again tonight, so I'll watch for you. Thank you for contacting me. I know you didn't have to get involved. My sister went through something similar last year. I wish someone had told her sooner instead of letting her find out the hard way. Nobody deserves to be made a fool of by people they trust." As Denver's skyline came into view just after 9 p.m., my hands began trembling on the steering wheel. Soon, I would see my husband and sister together with my own eyes. Soon, the last vestiges of my old life would crumble completely, leaving space for whatever came next. The Grandview Hotel sat gleaming in downtown Denver, its Art Deco facade lit dramatically against the night sky. I parked across the street, taking several deep breaths before walking through the revolving glass doors into the elegant lobby. Lizzie was behind the front desk, a petite woman in her 30s with kind eyes and prematurely gray hair. She nodded subtly when she saw me, gesturing toward the lobby bar where soft jazz music drifted from hidden speakers. And there they were. Colby and Nell sat at the same corner table from the security camera photo, but now I could see them in living color. Nell wore a black cocktail dress I'd never seen before, something expensive-looking that hugged her figure perfectly. Her hair was styled differently, more sophisticated than her usual look. Colby had on the charcoal suit he claimed was his lucky interview outfit, the one he'd worn to every important business meeting for the past 2 years. They weren't just sitting together, they were completely absorbed in each other, their body language radiating the intimacy of established lovers. Nell's hand rested on Colby's thigh, while his fingers played absently with her necklace, a simple gold chain that caught the bar's ambient lighting. But it was their expressions that cut deepest. They looked happy, genuinely, effortlessly happy in a way I hadn't seen from either of them in months. Colby's face was more relaxed than it ever appeared at home, his usual tension replaced by contentment. Nell was laughing at something he'd said, her head thrown back with unguarded joy. They looked like they belonged together. I stood frozen in the lobby for several minutes, watching them exist in their private bubble of stolen happiness, while my heart shattered into increasingly smaller pieces. This wasn't just physical betrayal. This was emotional intimacy, genuine connection, possibly even love. The realization that my husband might actually love my sister more than he'd ever loved me was almost more devastating than the affair itself. Taking a shaky breath, I walked toward their table, each step bringing me closer to the moment when their perfect evening would explode into the nightmare they'd earned. It was time to introduce myself to their secret world. I stood there for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, watching my husband and sister exist in their bubble of stolen intimacy. The background noise of the hotel lobby, elevator chimes, muffled conversations, the gentle clink of glassware from the bar faded into white noise as my mind processed the devastating reality before me. This wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment or a drunken mistake. The easy familiarity between them, the way Nell's fingers traced patterns on Colby's wrist while he spoke, the synchronized way they reached for their drinks, these were the unconscious gestures of people who had been together many times before. I felt something fundamental shift inside me, like tectonic plates realigning deep beneath the surface. The Sophie who had driven to Denver still harbored some hope that this was all a misunderstanding, that there would be a rational explanation that could preserve some semblance of my marriage and sisterly relationship. That naive woman was dying as I watched, replaced by someone harder and infinitely more clear-eyed. My phone buzzed with a text from Colby. Crazy long day of meetings, about to crash, love you. The casual lie, sent while he sat holding my sister's hand not 30 feet away, ignited something cold and calculating in my chest. He was texting me pretense while living his truth with her. How many nights had he sent similar messages from hotel rooms they shared? How many times had Nell laughed at my responses, at my gullible acceptance of his fabricated business obligations? I stepped behind a marble pillar, observing them from a concealed angle while my mind cataloged every detail. Nell had ordered wine, something red and expensive judging by the glass shape. Colby was drinking whiskey, probably the same aged bourbon he kept in our home bar for special occasions. Apparently, betraying his wife qualified as celebration-worthy. Their conversation appeared animated and comfortable. I watched Nell lean forward conspiratorially, saying something that made Colby's face light up with genuine amusement. When had he last looked at me that way? When had his expression last held that unguarded joy when I spoke? The answer was both immediate and devastating. Never. Not even during our early dating years had I inspired the kind of focused attention he was giving Nell. I had been the safe choice, the practical decision, the woman who would make a good wife and mother, while he apparently saved his passion for my sister. A memory surfaced unbidden from our wedding reception 6 years ago. Nell had given a maid of honor speech that praised my reliability, my nurturing nature, my ability to bring stability to Colby's scattered tendencies. At the time, I'd felt proud of these qualities. Now I realized she'd been describing the attributes of a good caretaker, not a beloved partner. I pulled out my phone and began discreetly recording them, capturing their intimate body language and obvious comfort with each other. The video evidence would be useful later, but more importantly, documenting their betrayal was helping me process the magnitude of their deception. As I filmed, Nell reached into her purse and produced a small wrapped box, sliding it across the table to Colby with a playful smile. He opened it carefully, his expression shifting to surprised delight as he pulled out what appeared to be expensive cufflinks. She had bought him jewelry. My sister had purchased intimate gifts for my husband while I was home celebrating a career advancement I'd excitedly wanted to share with both of them. Colby leaned across the table to kiss her, a soft, lingering gesture that spoke of established intimacy. This wasn't their first gift exchange, their first romantic dinner, or their first kiss. This was a relationship with its own history, traditions, and inside jokes. They had been building something together while systematically dismantling my trust. I thought about all the times Nell had offered marriage advice, sympathizing about Colby's travel schedule and emotional distance. She had consoled me through our rough patches while simultaneously being the cause of them. The psychological manipulation was almost more violating than the physical betrayal. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Nell. Thinking of you. How did Elaine's play go? Sorry again about tonight. The audacity was breathtaking. She was texting me fake concern from her romantic dinner with my husband, probably enjoying the twisted thrill of maintaining her deception in real time. I screenshot the message, adding it to my growing collection of evidence. Standing in that hotel lobby, watching my life's two most important relationships reveal themselves as elaborate performances, I felt the last vestiges of my old self burn away. The woman who had made excuses for Colby's absences, who had accepted Nell's cancellations without question, who had prioritized everyone's comfort over her own instincts, that woman was gone. In her place stood someone sharper, angrier, and infinitely more dangerous. Someone who understood that mercy was wasted on people who had shown none in return. Someone who was going to make them pay for every lie, every manipulation, every moment of stolen happiness they had built on the foundation of my ignorance. I wasn't going to confront them tonight. Confrontation implied they deserved explanations, discussions, opportunities to defend themselves. Instead, I was going to watch, learn, and plan their destruction with the same methodical care they had used to deceive me. Tomorrow, I would begin dismantling their lives piece by piece. But tonight, I would gather intelligence and let them enjoy their last evening of thinking they had gotten away with it. The transformation was complete. I was no longer Sophie the victim. I was Sophie the strategist, and their reckoning was about to begin. I spent another 20 minutes observing them from different vantage points around the hotel lobby, memorizing their interactions and taking additional photos. Their comfort level was staggering. They behaved like a couple celebrating an anniversary, not two people conducting a clandestine affair. When Nell excused herself to the restroom, Colby immediately pulled out his phone, probably to send me another fabricated update about his exhausting conference schedule. This was my opportunity. I approached their table with deliberate calm, my heels clicking softly against the marble floor. Colby was so absorbed in typing his lies that he didn't notice me until I slid into Nell's vacant chair. "Hello, darling." His face went through a fascinating sequence of expressions: confusion, recognition, shock, and finally panic. The phone slipped from his fingers, clattering onto the table as his mouth opened and closed without producing sound. "Sophie," he finally managed, his voice barely above a whisper. How did you? How did I find you? Or how did I find out? I kept my tone conversational, even pleasant. The answer to both is that you've gotten sloppy, Colby. 6 months of sneaking around, and you thought you were being so careful. His eyes darted toward the restroom where Nell had disappeared. "Sophie, this isn't what it looks like. Nell and I were celebrating your anniversary," I interrupted, gesturing toward the gift box and its expensive contents. Or perhaps discussing Rick's family emergency that prevented her from celebrating my career news with me tonight. Colby's face drained of color. You don't understand. It's complicated. Actually, it's quite simple. You're having an affair with my sister. You've been lying about your business trips to spend time together, and you're both so comfortable with deceiving me that you're sitting here acting like newlyweds while texting me fake concern and fabricated travel updates. I held up my phone, showing him the message he'd sent 20 minutes earlier about his exhausting day of meetings. Crazy long day, was it? You look remarkably refreshed for someone who's been in pharmaceutical conferences since dawn. Before he could respond, Nell returned from the restroom, her steps faltering when she saw me sitting at their intimate table. The wine glass slipped from her suddenly nerveless fingers, shattering against the floor in a spray of red liquid and crystal fragments. Sophie, her voice cracked on my name. I can explain. Can you? I remained seated, my posture relaxed despite the rage burning in my chest. Several nearby tables had begun to notice the commotion. Nell glanced around nervously, her face flushing with embarrassment as curious patrons turned to observe our family drama unfolding in their elegant hotel bar.
Please, she whispered, attempting damage control. Can we discuss this somewhere private? Private, I laughed, a sharp sound that carried across the suddenly quiet bar. You mean the way you and Colby have been privately discussing me for the past 6 months, comparing notes on how gullible I am, laughing about my excitement over career opportunities while you were planning your romantic getaways? Colby found his voice, leaning forward with desperate sincerity. Sophie, we never meant for this to happen. It just developed naturally. Naturally, I repeated, the way relationships develop when one person lies about business trips and the other lies about family emergencies. Very natural indeed. The hotel bar had grown uncomfortably quiet, conversations dying as guests strained to hear our discussion. I could see Lizzie watching from behind the front desk, her expression sympathetic but alert. The bartender had stopped polishing glasses, his attention fixed on our table. How long? I asked, my voice cutting through the silence. And don't insult me with more lies. I already know it's been at least 6 months of hotel visits. Nell and Colby exchanged a look loaded with guilt and panic. Neither wanted to be the first to confess the full scope of their betrayal. A year, Nell finally whispered. It started last fall. The timeline hit me like a physical blow. Last fall was when I'd miscarried our second child, when I'd been grieving and vulnerable and leaning on both of them for support. They had begun their affair during the worst period of my marriage, when I was most in need of their loyalty and love. During my miscarriage, I said, the words falling into the silence like stones into still water. You started this while I was losing our baby? Colby's face crumpled. Sophie, please. Please what? My voice rose slightly, carrying to the farthest corners of the bar. Please forgive you for building your relationship on my grief? Please understand that my sister comforted you through my pregnancy loss by sleeping with you? Several guests stood and left, unable to stomach the intimate cruelty of what they were witnessing. But many remained, transfixed by the real-time destruction of a family. Their attention felt appropriate. Colby and Nell had humiliated me in private for a year. They deserved to experience humiliation publicly. We're in love, Nell said suddenly, her chin lifting with defiant resignation. I know that doesn't excuse what we've done, but we're genuinely in love, Sophie. This isn't just some affair. The declaration hung in the air like a challenge. She was asking me to accept that their feelings justified their deception, that love somehow absolved them of responsibility for the devastation they'd caused. I stood slowly, gathering my purse while maintaining eye contact with both of them. Love, I repeated thoughtfully. How romantic. I hope it sustains you through what comes next. What do you mean? Colby asked, rising from his chair as if to follow me. I smiled, a cold expression that made both of them step back. I mean that your love story is about to become very expensive, very public, and very short-lived. Enjoy your weekend together.
It's going to be your last. As I walked away from their table, leaving them to face the staring crowd and their own guilty consciences, I felt lighter than I had in months. The confrontation hadn't provided closure. That would come later, when I systematically dismantled everything they'd built on the foundation of my trust. But it had provided clarity. They weren't remorseful. They were simply sorry they'd been caught. They felt entitled to their happiness, regardless of the cost to me, Elaine, Rick, or anyone else their selfishness had hurt. That entitled attitude would make destroying them so much more satisfying. I checked into a hotel room 3 blocks away from the Grandview, needing space to process what I'd witnessed and plan my next moves. The confrontation had provided answers, but it had also raised new questions about the full extent of their deception. A year-long affair suggested deeper financial and emotional entanglements than I'd initially suspected. Sitting on the edge of the hotel bed, I began systematically reviewing our joint accounts and credit card statements on my phone. The patterns that emerged made my stomach churn. Charges at expensive restaurants on dates when Colby claimed to be in airport food courts. Hotel expenses that exceeded his supposed single occupancy bookings. Even what appeared to be jewelry purchases from the same store where Nell had bought his cufflinks. The financial betrayal was staggering. Colby had been using our family money to fund his affair, probably justifying it as business expenses while I worked extra shifts to build Elaine's college fund. Every romantic dinner with my sister had been paid for with money I'd earned caring for cardiac patients. But the deeper I dug, the more disturbing patterns emerged. I found charges for couples spa services, weekend getaways to resort towns, even what appeared to be a weekend in Napa Valley that coincided with my weekend shift covering for a colleague's emergency. While I'd been working overtime to help our family financially, they'd been drinking wine in luxury accommodations. My phone rang, startling me from my investigation. It was Rick, Nell's husband, calling at nearly midnight. "Sophie, I'm sorry to call so late, but I need to ask you something. Is Nell with you tonight?" The question hung in the air, loaded with implications. Rick's voice carried a tension I'd never heard before, suggesting this wasn't the first time he'd questioned Nell's whereabouts. "No, Rick, she's not with me. Why would you think that? She said she was having an emergency sister dinner with you, some kind of crisis you needed help with. But when I tried to send flowers to cheer you up, the restaurant said they hadn't seen either of you." My heart broke for him. Rick was a good man, a devoted father to their 2 young children, and apparently just as much a victim of Nell's lies as I was. He'd been calling around, probably worried about his wife's safety, while she was playing house with my husband. "Rick, I think we need to talk in person, but not over the phone. Can you meet me somewhere tomorrow?" "Sophie, you're scaring me. Is Nell in some kind of trouble?" "Yes," I said simply, "but not the kind you're thinking. Can you come to Denver tomorrow? I'll explain everything." After we hung up, I realized the scope of destruction extended far beyond my marriage. Rick and Nell's children would be casualties of this affair, innocent victims of their parents' selfishness. 8-year-old twins who adored their father and didn't deserve to watch their family implode because of their mother's choices. I spent the next hour researching Colby's company policies regarding ethics violations and workplace conduct. Pritchett Pharmaceuticals had strict guidelines about expense account fraud and moral character clauses that could terminate employment for behavior that reflected poorly on the company. If I could prove Colby had been falsifying business expenses to fund his affair, his career would be over. More importantly, I discovered that Rick's accounting firm handled some of Pritchett Pharmaceuticals' business accounting. The professional connections between our families meant that exposing the affair would have professional ramifications beyond just personal humiliation. Around 2 a.m., I received an unexpected text from Lizzie at the Grandview. They just left together, heading to the elevators. "Thought you should know they're definitely sharing a room." I thanked her and added this confirmation to my growing file of evidence. Tomorrow, I would show Rick the financial records, the hotel documentation, and the photographic proof of their year-long deception. Together, we would decide how to proceed in a way that protected our children while ensuring appropriate consequences for our cheating spouses. But first, I needed to make one more discovery that would seal their fate permanently. I spent the remaining hours before dawn researching private investigators in the Richmond area, divorce attorneys with experience in complex financial cases, and forensic accountants who specialized in uncovering hidden assets. If Colby and Nell thought they could dissolve their marriages quietly and ride off into the sunset together, they were about to learn how wrong they were. As Saturday morning dawned over Denver, I felt a cold satisfaction settling in my chest. They had created this situation through a year of careful deception. Now I would dismantle their lives with equally careful planning, except my strategy would be both legal and devastating. The final phase of their destruction was about to begin, and unlike their secret affair, my revenge would be conducted in full public view. They wanted to be together so badly they'd betrayed everyone who trusted them. Perfect. They could face the consequences together too. Rick was flying to Denver on the first available flight. By evening, they would discover that their secret was no longer secret, and their victims were no longer passive. The reckoning they'd earned was finally coming, and it would be more thorough than anything they could have imagined. I was done being the understanding wife and naive sister. It was time to be their worst nightmare instead. Rick arrived at Denver International Airport at 3 p.m., looking haggard and confused. I met him at baggage claim, recognizing immediately that this confrontation would shatter his world as completely as mine had been destroyed. He was a good man who deserved better than what I was about to tell him, but he also deserved the truth.
Sophie, what's going on? You sounded so strange on the phone. Rick's normally cheerful demeanor was strained with worry. Is Nell hurt? Are you in some kind of trouble? I guided him to a quiet corner of the airport, away from the bustle of travelers and announcements. Rick, I need you to sit down. What I'm about to tell you is going to be very difficult to hear. As I showed him the photographs, the financial records, and the hotel documentation, I watched his face transform from confusion to disbelief to devastating comprehension. His hands shook as he scrolled through the evidence on my phone, occasionally stopping to study a particularly damning image. "A year," he whispered after I'd finished explaining everything. "She's been lying to me for a year while I was working 60-hour weeks to pay for those kids' private school and her shopping trips." Rick, I'm so sorry. I know this is horrible, but you needed to know. He sat in silence for several minutes, processing the magnitude of Nell's betrayal. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a hardness I'd never heard before. Those weekend trips she took for work conferences, the emergency client dinners, the sister emergencies. He looked up at me with hollow eyes. How many times did she use you as an excuse to spend time with your husband? Too many to count. I started tracking the patterns last night. Rick, they've been using our families as cover stories while they built their relationship. Something shifted in his expression, grief giving way to cold anger. My children have been asking why Mommy seems so happy lately, why she's been singing in the kitchen and buying new clothes. I thought she was finally feeling better after her depression last year. The revelation that Nell had been depressed while starting her affair added another layer of complexity to the situation. She'd been struggling in her marriage and had chosen to address it by pursuing my husband rather than working on her own relationship or seeking counseling. "What are you planning to do?" Rick asked, his accountant's mind already working through the practical implications. "I'm going to destroy them both," I said simply, "but I want to do it in a way that protects our children and our own futures. They made this mess. They should be the ones who suffer for it." Rick nodded grimly. "What do you need from me?" "Access to Colby's business expense accounts through your firm's records. I want to prove he's been defrauding his company to fund the affair. That should cost him his job and potentially lead to criminal charges." "Consider it done." "What else?" I outlined my developing strategy: coordinated divorce filings that would freeze all assets, public exposure timed for maximum professional damage,
and evidence packages delivered to everyone in their professional and social circles. The goal was comprehensive humiliation that matched the scope of their deception. "There's something else," Rick said after I'd finished explaining. "Nell took out a personal loan last month, said it was for home improvements, $20,000 that I never saw used on the house." The implications hit me immediately. She was planning to leave you. That money was probably going toward an apartment or travel fund for her new life with Colby. Rick's jaw tightened. Then she's about to discover that financial planning for adultery is a lot more expensive than she anticipated. We spent the next hour developing a detailed timeline for executing our revenge. Rick would return to Richmond that evening and begin securing financial records, while I stayed in Denver to gather additional evidence. Monday morning, we would file for divorce simultaneously, catching both Colby and Nell off guard with coordinated legal action. But first, we were going to confront them together. "I want to see them," Rick said as we drove toward the Grandview Hotel. "I want to look my wife in the eye while she explains how she justified destroying our family for your husband." "Rick, are you sure? This is going to be brutal." "Good. It should be brutal. They've been living in a fantasy where their actions don't have consequences. It's time to introduce them to reality." As we walked through the hotel lobby, I felt a sense of righteous purpose that had been missing from my earlier confrontation. Last night, I'd been acting from hurt and shock. Today, I was acting from strategy and justice. Rick's presence beside me, representing the full scope of families they damaged, would make their shame complete. We found them at the hotel restaurant, sharing what appeared to be a romantic brunch. They were dressed casually, looking like any other couple enjoying a weekend getaway. The normalcy of their appearance made their betrayal seem even more calculated and cruel. "Hello, darling," I said, approaching their table with Rick beside me. "I'd like you to meet someone." The moment Nell saw her husband standing next to me, her face went white. Colby dropped his coffee cup, sending brown liquid splashing across the white tablecloth. They both understood immediately that their secret was no longer secret, that their victims had found each other and compared notes. "Rick," Nell whispered, her voice barely audible, "what are you doing here?" "Learning about my wife's double life," he replied coldly. "Sophie's been very educational." As they sat frozen in their chairs, faced with the two people whose trust they'd violated most completely, I felt the satisfaction of justice beginning to unfold. This was only the beginning of what they'd earned, but it was a perfect start. Their weekend of stolen happiness was about to become the first day of their very public reckoning. The silence at their brunch table stretched for what felt like minutes, but was probably only seconds. Colby recovered first, his business training kicking in as he attempted damage control. "Rick, I know this looks bad, but let me explain." "Explain what?" Rick's voice cut through the restaurant's ambient noise like a blade. "Explain how you've been sleeping with my wife while I worked late to pay for your hotel rooms? Or explain how you've been lying to your own wife while she covered extra shifts to support your family?" Other diners had begun to notice the tension at our table. A family with young children moved to seats farther away, and the waiter, who'd been approaching with coffee, stopped mid-stride, clearly uncomfortable with the escalating confrontation. Nell found her voice, though it came out small and shaky. "Rick, please, we need to talk about this privately." "Privately?" I laughed, settling into an empty chair at their table without invitation. "The way you two have been privately discussing our marriages for the past year? I think we're past privacy, don't you?" Rick remained standing, his posture rigid with controlled fury. "Sophie's shown me the financial records, Nell. The restaurant charges, the hotel bills, even that $20,000 loan you claimed was for home improvements. Our children's college fund money spent on your affair." Colby's face went pale. "What financial records?" I pulled out my phone, scrolling through the screenshots I'd compiled. "Your expense reports, darling. Amazing how many pharmaceutical conferences happen to coincide with Nell's work emergencies. Although I have to say, the spa treatments were a creative touch. Since when do pharmaceutical sales include couples massages? Sophie, you're taking this out of context, Colby said, his tone shifting to the patronizing voice he used when he thought I was being unreasonable. Those expenses were legitimate business costs. Were they? Rick sat down across from them, pulling out his own phone. Because I've already contacted your employer's HR department. Turns out they're very interested in reviewing expense reports when there are allegations of fraud. The color drained completely from Colby's face. You did what? I called James Hatchett personally, Rick continued, naming Colby's district manager. Explained that my accounting firm had noticed some irregularities that might affect their business relationship with us. He's expecting a full audit of your accounts by Wednesday. I watched Colby process the implications. His career at Pritchett Pharmaceuticals was over, and depending on what the audit revealed, he might face criminal charges for expense account fraud. The financial foundation of his affair was about to collapse, taking his professional reputation with it. You can't do this, Nell whispered, finally understanding that their secret romance was about to cost them everything. Our children don't deserve this. Our children? Rick's voice rose slightly, drawing more attention from nearby tables. You mean the children you abandoned emotionally while you were building your new life with Sophie's husband? The children who asked me why Mommy doesn't seem to love Daddy anymore. Tears started flowing down Nell's cheeks, but I felt no sympathy. She was crying for herself, not for the damage she'd caused to two families. We need to work this out rationally, Colby said, looking between Rick and me with desperate calculation. Think about Elaine, Sophie. Do you really want to put her through a messy divorce? The mention of my daughter ignited something fierce in my chest. Don't you dare use Elaine to justify your behavior. You've been lying to her for a year, missing her events for romantic getaways with my sister. You lost the right to claim concern for her well-being when you chose adultery over family. Tears started flowing down Nell's cheeks, but I felt no sympathy. She was crying for herself, not for the damage she'd caused to two families. We need to work this out rationally, Colby said, looking between Rick and me with desperate calculation. Think about Elaine, Sophie. Do you really want to put her through a messy divorce? The mention of my daughter ignited something fierce in my chest. Don't you dare use Elaine to justify your behavior. You've been lying to her for a year, missing her events for romantic getaways with my sister. You lost the right to claim concern for her well-being when you chose adultery over family. Tears started flowing down Nell's cheeks, but I felt no sympathy. She was crying for herself, not for the damage she'd caused to two families. We need to work this out rationally, Colby said. Think about Elaine, Sophie. Do you really want to put her through a messy divorce? The mention of my daughter ignited something fierce in my chest. Don't you dare use Elaine to justify your behavior. You've been lying to her for a year, missing her events for romantic getaways with my sister. You lost the right to claim concern for her well-being when you chose adultery over family.
Rick leaned forward, his accountant's mind clearly working through financial strategies. Here's what's going to happen. Sophie and I are filing for divorce Monday morning. All assets will be frozen pending discovery proceedings. Your affair has been documented, photographed, and financially traced. The evidence will be presented in court and shared with both your employers. Rick, please. Nell reached for her husband's hand, but he pulled away as if her touch burned him. I'm not finished. You'll both need lawyers, probably criminal defense attorneys if the expense account fraud charges stick. You'll need new jobs since your current employers will likely terminate you for moral turpitude clauses. And you'll need to find somewhere else to live since neither of us will be covering your housing costs anymore. The systematic destruction of their future was beautiful to watch. They'd built their relationship on lies and stolen money. Now they'd face the consequences without the financial security they'd taken for granted. "This is vindictive," Colby protested. "We made mistakes, but destroying our careers and futures won't undo what happened." "You're right," I said, standing from the table. "It won't undo what happened, but it will ensure that your choices have appropriate consequences. You wanted to be together so badly you were willing to betray everyone who trusted you? Congratulations! Now you can be together while you're both unemployed, divorced, and facing potential criminal charges." As Rick and I walked away from their table, leaving them to contemplate the wreckage of their carefully constructed deception, I felt lighter than I had in months. The burden of ignorance had been lifted, replaced by the clarity of righteous action. We had allies now. Rick's accounting expertise, my medical profession's ethical standards, and a shared commitment to ensuring that their betrayal cost them everything they'd taken for granted. The children would be protected, the assets would be fairly divided, and justice would be both swift and comprehensive. Their affair was about to become the most expensive mistake of their lives. Rick and I spent Sunday morning in my hotel room, transforming it into a war room, complete with laptops, legal documents, and financial records spread across every available surface. What had begun as personal betrayal was evolving into a comprehensive legal and financial strategy that would leave no aspect of their deception unexposed. "I've been through Colby's expense reports going back 18 months, Rick said, adjusting his reading glasses as he scrolled through spreadsheets. "The pattern of fraud is extensive and well documented. Hotel charges for supposed single occupancy that actually covered suites, restaurant bills for client dinners that happened on weekends when no clients were in town, even charges for jewelry that he claimed were corporate gifts." I reviewed the timeline he'd created, marveling at the systematic nature of their deception. "Look at this. Every time Nell canceled our sister dinners, Colby had a corresponding business trip. They weren't just having an affair, they were running a logistical operation. The $20,000 loan Nell took out is particularly damaging," Rick continued. "She forged my signature on the application, claiming it was for home improvements that never happened. That's bank fraud in addition to adultery." The scope of criminal behavior was staggering. What had seemed like a simple affair was actually a complex web of financial crimes that could result in felony charges for both of them. Their romance had made them sloppy criminals. I called Patricia Sanderson, the divorce attorney Virginia had recommended months ago during my certification celebration. Even though it was Sunday, she agreed to an emergency consultation after I explained the circumstances. "Mrs. Cross, what you're describing is one of the most well-documented cases of marital fraud I've encountered," she said during our video call. "The financial evidence alone would be sufficient for a fault-based divorce with significant asset protection for you. But combined with the criminal elements Mr. Robbins has uncovered, this becomes a case study in comprehensive marital dissolution strategy." She outlined our legal options with professional enthusiasm. Immediate asset freezing to prevent them from hiding money, emergency custody orders to protect the children from the chaos of criminal proceedings, and coordinated filing in both Virginia and Colorado to maximize legal pressure. "The key is timing," Patricia explained. "If we file simultaneously in both jurisdictions while presenting the criminal evidence to the district attorney's office, we create a perfect storm of legal consequences that they'll be unable to manage effectively." Rick had been making his own calls, coordinating with his law firm's criminal defense division and the ethics boards of both Colby's pharmaceutical company and Nell's real estate firm. His methodical approach to destruction was beautiful to watch. James Hatchett confirmed that Colby's employment will be terminated pending the criminal investigation, Rick reported after ending his latest call. Pritchett Pharmaceuticals has a zero-tolerance policy for expense account fraud. He'll be blacklisted from the pharmaceutical industry. What about Nell's job? Her real estate license is under review by the state board. Apparently, using client information to facilitate personal fraud is considered a serious ethical violation. She'll likely lose her license permanently. The professional consequences were falling into place with satisfying precision. Their careers, built over years of education and experience, would be destroyed by their own choices. The financial foundation they'd relied on to fund their affair would disappear completely. But the most devastating element of our strategy was still being developed: the public exposure campaign. "I've compiled a comprehensive evidence package," I explained to Rick, showing him the folder on my laptop. Photos, financial records, timeline documentation, even recordings of their lies to us. I want to send this to everyone in their professional and social circles. "Their children's teachers, their neighbors, their extended families," Rick added grimly. "Everyone who's been wondering about their recent behavior changes deserves to understand what they've been witnessing." We spent hours crafting carefully worded emails that would accompany the evidence packages. The tone needed to be factual rather than emotional, presenting the documentation without editorial commentary. The evidence would speak for itself. "What about the children?" I asked, momentarily softening as I thought about Rick's 8-year-old twins and my daughter Elaine. "They're going to be hurt by this exposure." Rick's expression darkened. "My children has been asking why Mommy doesn't love Daddy anymore. Elaine has been disappointed by her father's absences for months. The damage to them is already done. Now we're just making sure the people responsible face appropriate consequences." He was right. Our children were already casualties of their parents' choices. Protecting Colby and Nell from consequences wouldn't undo the harm they'd caused. It would only enable them to continue their destructive behavior. "We send the packages Monday evening, after the divorce papers are filed and the criminal complaints are submitted," I decided. "By Tuesday morning, everyone in their lives will know exactly who they really are." As Sunday evening approached, our strategy was complete. Legal action, criminal complaints, professional destruction, and social exposure would combine to ensure that their betrayal cost them everything they'd taken for granted. The systematic nature of our response matched the systematic nature of their deception. "Any regrets?" Rick asked as we prepared to return to Richland. I considered the question seriously. In less than 48 hours, I'd transformed from an ignorant wife into an agent of comprehensive justice. The woman who'd driven to Denver hoping for explanations no longer existed. "None," I replied. "They made their choices deliberately and repeatedly. Now they get to live with the consequences of those choices permanently." Tomorrow, their secret would become public knowledge, and their comfortable lives would begin unraveling with the same careful planning they've used to betray us. Justice was about to be served, and it would be thorough, public, and irreversible. Monday morning arrived with the crisp efficiency of a well-orchestrated campaign. I dropped Elaine at school with our usual routine, though internally I was counting down hours until the legal machinery I'd set in motion would begin dismantling Colby and Nell's carefully constructed lies. "Mommy, when is Daddy coming home?" Elaine asked as I walked her to the classroom door. "I want to show him my art project." "Soon, sweetheart," I replied, the last lie I would tell to protect his image. By evening, she would know the truth about her father, delivered gently but honestly. Children deserved better than the fairy tales I'd been weaving to excuse his absences. At 9 a.m. sharp, I met Patricia Sanderson at the courthouse. The divorce papers were comprehensive and damning, documenting every aspect of Colby's financial fraud and emotional abandonment. Virginia had taken the morning off to provide moral support, her presence a reminder that some relationships could be trusted completely. "The emergency custody order has been approved," Patricia informed me as we walked through the courthouse corridors. Given the evidence of financial instability and criminal behavior, the judge agreed that Elaine's welfare required immediate protection. Simultaneously, Rick was filing his own divorce papers across town, accompanied by his criminal defense attorney and a forensic accountant. Our coordinated approach would prevent Colby and Nell from consulting with each other before responding to the legal assault. At 10:30 a.m., process servers arrived at both Colby's office and Nell's real estate firm. I had specifically requested that the papers be delivered in their workplaces, ensuring maximum professional embarrassment as their colleagues witnessed their personal scandals exploding in real time. Patricia received confirmation texts within minutes. "Colby's been served at Pritchett Pharmaceuticals.
According to the process server, his reaction was dramatic. Apparently, he collapsed into his chair and had to be escorted to a conference room for privacy. The mental image of Colby's public humiliation provided deep satisfaction. After a year of secret meetings and private jokes at my expense, he was finally experiencing shame in front of his professional peers. Nell's service went similarly, Rick texted me. Process server says she started crying immediately and asked her supervisor for the rest of the day off. Her colleagues are apparently very curious about what legal documents could cause such a reaction. By noon, the criminal complaints had been filed with both the Richmond Police Department and the Colorado Attorney General's office. The evidence Rick had compiled made prosecution likely, especially given the interstate nature of their fraud scheme. But the most satisfying element was yet to come, the public exposure campaign. At 5 p.m., after both Colby and Nell had received their divorce papers and begun the humiliating process of finding emergency legal representation, I began sending the evidence packages to their extended networks. The first email went to Nell's mother, my former mother-in-law, who had always favored my sister and criticized my lack of ambition. The subject line read simply, "Information about Nell's recent activities." The attached photos and financial records would finally show her which daughter actually deserved disappointment. Next went packages to their professional colleagues, neighbors, and mutual friends. Each email was factual and brief. I thought you should be aware of recent developments that may affect your professional or personal relationships with Colby Stone and Nell Robbins. The responses began within an hour. Shocked texts from neighbors who had wondered about the frequent business trips and emergency meetings. Professional contacts expressing concern about the criminal implications. Even Elaine's school principal, who had questioned Colby's absence from parent conferences, finally understanding why he'd been unavailable. But the most devastating response came from Nell's best friend Asher Cross, ironically sharing my married surname. His text was brutal in its directness. "I've been covering for Nell's lies to Rick for months, thinking she was protecting him from work stress. Now I understand she was just protecting herself from consequences. This is sick, Sophie. I'm so sorry." By 7 p.m., both their phones were ringing constantly. Virginia sat with me as I fielded calls from family members, friends, and even former colleagues who had suspected something was wrong but hadn't wanted to interfere. The evidence I'd provided confirmed their suspicions and validated their concerns. Colby finally called around 8 p.m., his voice raw with desperation. "Sophie, you've destroyed everything. My job, my reputation, my future. How could you be so vindictive?" "Vindictive?" I laughed, a sound that carried no humor. "I documented your choices and shared the truth with people who deserve to know it. If the truth destroys your reputation, perhaps you should have made better choices. Think about Elaine. She's going to grow up knowing her father is a criminal. She's going to grow up knowing her father chose adultery and fraud over his family's welfare. The criminal charges are just the legal consequence of your moral failures." The call ended with his pathetic threats about fighting the custody arrangements and demanding fair treatment in the divorce proceedings. He still didn't understand that fairness required accountability, not protection from consequences. Nell's text messages began around 9 p.m., alternating between furious accusations and desperate pleas. "You've ruined my children's lives," she wrote. "They're going to be humiliated at school because of your vindictiveness." I responded once, "Your children are going to be honest about their family situation instead of covering for their mother's lies. That's probably healthier than the deception you were teaching them." As Monday night ended, both Colby and Nell were facing criminal investigations, divorce proceedings, terminated employment, and complete social exposure. Their secret affair had become the most public scandal our communities had seen in years. Rick called just before midnight with a final update. Nell came home to collect clothes and found the locks changed. Her attorney says I have every right to secure the property pending asset discovery. She's staying in a hotel, probably the first time she's paid for her own room in months. Their comfortable lives were officially over. The systematic destruction of their security, reputation, and future was complete. Tomorrow would bring new challenges as they attempted to rebuild from the ruins of their own choices. But tonight, justice felt satisfying and thorough. They had earned every consequence they were facing, and more were surely coming as the legal process unfolded. The affair that had cost me my illusions had ultimately cost them everything that mattered.
The revenge was perfect because it was proportional, legal, and permanent. Tuesday morning brought the satisfying chaos of consequences in full bloom. I woke to 17 missed calls and 43 text messages, a digital avalanche of reactions to Monday's revelations. The evidence packages had circulated beyond my initial distribution list, shared among social networks with the viral efficiency of genuinely shocking news. Virginia arrived at my house with coffee and pastries, settling in to help me navigate the communication storm. "Your phone's been buzzing nonstop since I got here," she observed, scrolling through the messages on my behalf. Half are supportive, half are asking for more details, and a few are from reporters. Reporters? Local news stations. Apparently, a pharmaceutical executive committing expense fraud while conducting an affair with his sister-in-law is considered human interest news. Channel 7 wants to interview you about corporate ethics in the healthcare industry. The media attention was unexpected but welcome. Public accountability would ensure that Colby and Nell couldn't quietly disappear to start fresh somewhere else. Their scandal would follow them wherever they attempted to rebuild. At 9 a.m., Patricia called with updates from the legal front. Colby's attorney contacted me this morning requesting mediation. Apparently, he wants to negotiate a settlement that avoids public disclosure of the financial evidence. "Absolutely not," I replied immediately. "He made this mess public when he decided to defraud his company and betray his family. He can face the consequences publicly." "I thought you'd say that." I've also received a fascinating call from Pritchett Pharmaceuticals' legal department. They want to cooperate with our asset recovery efforts since Colby's fraud directly impacted their financial statements. They're offering to help us trace every falsified expense. The corporate cooperation would accelerate the criminal case exponentially. Colby had unknowingly picked the worst possible target for his fraud scheme, a company with extensive legal resources and zero tolerance for ethical violations. Rick called during lunch with equally satisfying updates. Nell's real estate license has been officially suspended pending investigation. Her supervising broker terminated her employment this morning and is reviewing every transaction she's handled for potential ethical violations. What about the bank fraud charges? The district attorney is pursuing felony charges. Apparently, forging a spouse's signature on loan documents while conducting an extramarital affair creates what they call aggravated circumstances. She's looking at serious prison time. The legal machinery was functioning perfectly, grinding their comfortable lives into prosecutable dust. But the most gratifying development was still the social consequences. Throughout Tuesday, I received calls from people I hadn't spoken to in years. High school friends, former colleagues, even distant relatives who had heard about the scandal through various networks. Each conversation reinforced how thoroughly their reputations had been destroyed. "I always thought Nell was too perfect," confided my cousin James, who lived 3 states away. "The social media posts about her amazing marriage, the constant bragging about Rick's success. Now I understand she was overcompensating for her guilt." The pattern repeated in every conversation. People had noticed subtle signs of deception, but had dismissed their instincts out of politeness or family loyalty. My evidence had validated their suspicions and given them permission to trust their observations. But the most revealing call came from Elaine's school counselor, Mrs. Hatchett, who had requested a meeting to discuss supporting Elaine through the family transition. "Sophie, I want you to know that Elaine's behavior makes so much more sense now," she explained during our afternoon conference. "The anxiety about her father's promises, the confusion about why he missed important events, she's been processing adult deception for months without understanding what she was experiencing." The conversation reinforced my decision to pursue complete transparency rather than protecting Colby's image. Elaine had already been damaged by his lies. Truth would at least provide clarity for her confusion. That evening, as I helped Elaine with homework, she asked the question I'd been preparing for since Sunday. "Mommy, why is everyone talking about Daddy at school? Sarah's mom asked if we were okay, and I didn't know what she meant." I closed her math workbook and sat beside her on the couch, choosing my words carefully. "Daddy made some very bad choices, sweetheart. He lied to us about his business trips and about other important things. Because of those lies, he's going to be in trouble with the police and with his job." Is that why he's been gone so much? Yes, Daddy wasn't really working during those trips. He was spending time with Aunt Nell instead of being honest with us about his feelings. Elaine processed this information with the startling resilience children often display when finally given truth instead of confusion. Are you and Daddy getting divorced like Tommy's parents? Yes, we are. But that doesn't change how much we both love you, or how hard we'll work to make sure you're safe and happy. She nodded solemnly, then asked the question that broke my heart. Does this mean I don't have to pretend Daddy's business trips are important anymore? The realization that my 7-year-old had been protecting my feelings by pretending to believe Colby's lies was devastating. She had been carrying adult burdens while I had been enabling adult deception. No, sweetheart. From now on, we're only going to tell each other the truth, even when it's difficult. As Tuesday night ended, I felt a profound sense of completion. The legal consequences were unfolding perfectly, the social accountability was comprehensive, and most importantly, the cycle of deception that had poisoned our family was finally broken. Colby and Nell were facing criminal charges, financial ruin, and social exile. Their children would grow up understanding that choices have consequences, and that truth, however painful, was preferable to comfortable lies. The affair that had seemed like my greatest tragedy was transforming into my most empowering victory. Not because I had destroyed them, but because I had finally chosen my own dignity over their comfort. Tomorrow would bring new challenges as the legal process continued, but tonight I could rest knowing that justice was not only being served, but was being witnessed by everyone who mattered. Their secret was no longer secret, their comfort was no longer funded by deception, and their future was no longer built on other people's ignorance. The reckoning was complete, and it was everything they had earned. 6 months later, I stood in the cardiac unit break room reviewing my final certification exam scores. The nursing specialization program I'd started during the chaos of my divorce had become my anchor, providing structure and purpose while my personal life was rebuilt from scratch. 94%, Virginia announced, reading over my shoulder. The highest score in your cohort. Dr. Pritchett is going to be thrilled when he sees these results. The professional achievement felt more meaningful than it would have during my marriage. This success belonged entirely to me, earned through my own dedication without compromising my integrity or enabling someone else's deception. Elaine had adapted to our new normal with remarkable resilience. The truth about her father's choices had initially confused her, but therapy with Mrs. Hatchett had helped her process the complex emotions of loving someone who had made destructive decisions. She was thriving in ways I hadn't expected, more confident and open now that our family operated on honesty rather than protective lies. Daddy called last night, she had informed me that morning over breakfast. He wanted to know if I missed him. What did you tell him? I told him I missed the daddy I thought he was, but I like knowing the truth better than believing pretend things. Colby's supervised visitations had become sporadic after his sentencing. 3 years of probation for expense account fraud, plus restitution to Pritchett Pharmaceuticals that would take him decades to repay. He was working at a call center, the only job available to someone with a criminal record in corporate fraud. His apologies to Elaine were genuine but irrelevant. She had learned to value consistency over grand gestures. Nell's situation was more severe. The bank fraud charges had resulted in 18 months in minimum security prison, followed by 5 years of probation. Rick had been granted full custody of their twins, who were receiving counseling to process their mother's absence and the financial instability her choices had created. Any regrets about how far you took the consequences? Virginia asked as we walked toward the parking garage after our shift. I considered the question seriously. The systematic destruction of their lives had been thorough and public, affecting not just them, but their children and extended families. Some nights, I wondered if justice required such comprehensive devastation. They had a year to consider the impact of their choices on our families, I finally answered. They chose to continue deceiving us every day for 12 months. I gave them consequences that matched the scope of their betrayal. And now? Now I focus on building something better instead of dwelling on what I destroyed. The apartment Elaine and I shared was smaller than our old house, but it felt more spacious somehow. Every piece of furniture had been chosen by me, every routine designed around our actual needs rather than accommodating someone else's lies. We had game nights on Fridays, museum visits on Saturdays, and Sunday dinners with Virginia's family, who had become our chosen extended family. My certification had led to a promotion and a significant salary increase. The cardiac specialist position allowed me to mentor newer nurses while working with the most complex cases in the unit. The financial independence felt like a luxury after years of budgeting around Colby's unreliable contributions and secret expenditures. But the most profound change was internal. The woman who had made excuses for broken promises and accepted crumbs of attention had been replaced by someone who demanded honesty and reciprocal effort in all relationships. I dated occasionally, but with clear boundaries and realistic expectations. Having experienced the cost of ignoring red flags, I was committed to trusting my instincts rather than my hopes. "Mom, are you happy now?" Elaine asked one evening as we worked together on a jigsaw puzzle featuring her favorite sunflowers. The question echoed one she'd asked the night before I discovered the affair, but now I could answer with complete certainty. "Yes, sweetheart, I'm happy because our life is honest now. We don't have to pretend or make excuses or wonder if people mean what they say." "Me too," she replied, fitting another piece into place. "I like knowing what's really happening, even when it's sad sometimes." That evening, Rick called with an update on his own rebuilding process. He had started dating a colleague from his accounting firm, someone who appreciated his dedication to his children and his commitment to financial transparency. His twins were adjusting well to their new routine, though they still struggled with their mother's absence. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we hadn't found out?" he asked during our conversation. "They would have kept lying until something forced the truth out anyway," I replied. "Affairs like theirs don't stay secret forever. We just chose to control the timeline instead of letting them continue controlling the narrative." As I prepared for bed that night, I reflected on the transformation from victim to victor. The woman who had driven to Denver 6 months ago was operating from hurt and shock. The woman who exists now operated from strength and clarity. Colby and Nell had lost everything they'd taken for granted: their careers, their reputations, their financial security, and their comfortable assumption that their choices wouldn't have real consequences. But they had also gained something important: the opportunity to rebuild their lives based on truth rather than deception. Their children would grow up understanding that integrity mattered more than convenience, that trust was earned through consistency rather than promises. The painful lesson their parents had taught through negative example might ultimately serve them better than comfortable lies would have. The affair that had seemed like the end of my world had actually marked the beginning of a better one. Not because I had destroyed them, but because I had finally chosen my own dignity, my daughter's emotional health, and the principle that truth, however painful, was preferable to beautiful lies. I fell asleep that night in a home built on honesty, planning a future shaped by my own choices rather than someone else's deception. The revenge had been satisfying, but the reconstruction had been transformative. The story that began with betrayal had ended with empowerment, and that was the sweetest victory of all.
Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.